Bike racing, does that conjure up scary thoughts of huge pelotons and intimidating team tactics? Well, road racing can be a little bit daunting, but if you want to dip your toe into bike racing, time trials are the perfect solution. And as triathletes, we pretty much do them anyway when it comes to non-drafting event, because we just top and tail it with a swim and a run. So whether you want to use a time trial to spice up your triathlon training or see it as a standalone race, we have got you covered. I'm going to be sharing everything that you need to know before doing your first time trials. All right, don't be put off by the word race. See it more as an event or a race against yourself. Obviously, doing anything for the first time can be a little bit daunting, but the more prepared you are, the more you're going to get out of it. So it is simply yourself, your bike, and I guess the stopwatch. Now, riders in a time trial are set off for intervals. It's usually a minute apart. Sometimes it can be 2 minutes apart. And the distances can vary too, but for your first one and the standard, the 10-mile TT is the perfect option. And you'll find quite a few clubs in the UK anyway will actually run evening events throughout the summer months for just doing 10-mile time trial casually as training. Beyond the 10-mile TT, you've got the 25, the 50 and the 100-miler on offer, which you actually see fairly commonly in the UK, but those tend to go off at a ridiculously early hour on the weekend. And there is even a 12-hour option, which my crazy friend Kim is about to do, so good luck, Kim, you are entirely mad. But for us as triathletes, these are a great opportunity. Whether you're training for an Olympic distance, a half Ironman or even an Ironman, there's distances that pretty well match up, and if you really want to, you could make it into a brick training session and add the run on afterwards. But that aside, even if you do it as a sole standalone race, it's a great way to practice your nutrition, your pacing and your bike position. And I actually had a go at doing a 100-mile TT before my first Ironman with a brick afterwards, and I must admit it wasn't very enjoyable, but it did make the Ironman seem a little bit easier in relation. You've taken the plunge and entered, but by the way, you do need to make sure you enter beforehand. So there are some things that you now need to consider. So beforehand, you'll usually be able to access a map or a route of the course and the profile as well. Although that said, time trials tend to be on a fairly flat course. Obviously, it depends slightly on where you live. And if it is a local event, then go and ride it beforehand. That's the best bet. If it's a bit further afield, then even consider going to drive it if it's going to put you at ease. And if all of that fails, then courses do tend to be an out and back. So at least for the second half of the event, you're going to know what to expect. And just speak to fellow riders, maybe someone from your club has done the event before, and that'll just give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect. When it comes to equipment, it makes sense to ride the bike that you're going to use in triathlons, whatever that might be. And don't be surprised to see the full spectrum of bikes when you come to a time trial. You'll have the guys with the fully kitted aero bikes with their aero wheels and skin suits, and then you'll have just a club rider in their club jersey riding their road bike. And if you've got a road bike, you can always add some clip-on TT bars to help with those aerodynamics. And then there's other smaller gains you can do, such as taking off anything that's going to be excessive with drag. Maybe you've got a mud guard on, you might want to remove that. Remove your saddlebag if you don't have any essentials in there. If you've got a spare bottle cage, take that off. Anything that's just not needed, because it is only going to be a 10-mile TT. Usually there'll be some support. If you're doing a longer TT, you probably want to make sure you've definitely got some spares with you, and obviously the amount of hydration you need to carry will depend how long it is. And then there's your clothing and your position, and there's a lot of drag when it comes to that. So just wear the tightest fitting clothes that you've got, obviously that are cycling relevant. You could even use your tri-suit as great. If you've got a sleeved one, even better. And then you can leave those finer gains to once you've got the bug and you want to invest in a skin suit or something more serious. But for your first one, just use what you've got. On race day itself, make sure you allow yourself plenty of time to get there, whether you're cycling there or you're driving. And there'll be just different processes. You'll have to pin your number on, which might be something you've not done before. If you're wearing a skin suit or a tri-suit, it can be a bit tricky. Just get someone to help you with that. And then note, you'll obviously be given your start time, but there'll also be a cut-off time for registration. So make sure you take that in. And also note that where registration is in comparison to the start line, because I've made that mistake before, registered, wondered why there weren't many people hanging around, and found out that the start line was 4 miles up the road. I arrived in a bit of a sweaty mess. The distance of your race and the pace that you plan to start off at will determine just how long and what intensity you need to warm up at. But remember, you are starting from a standstill, so your body needs to be ready to go from the off. And then you've got two options when it comes to your warm-up, either out on the road on your bike, or you can do it static with turbo or rollers. If you are using that option, just make sure you allow enough time to get your bike fully put together and ready. And then you want to work backwards from your actual start time, but add a little bit onto that because you'll need to go there ahead of time and actually just check in with the starter or the starter's assistant. So I would say at least 5 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes before the start. And if it's really bad weather, then wear a jacket, and you'll usually find that the starter will allow you to take that off and leave it at the start. And then usually about 2 minutes before your actual start time, you'll be called in. So you've got to be entirely ready by then. Close to your start time, it's a good idea just to hang around and watch how the starter counts the riders down and just the general process, and you'll get called up to the start line usually pretty soon after the rider in front of you has been set off, and this is your last chance to ask any questions you might have to the starter, and then it's time to focus. So you want to make sure you're in the right gear so you know what the course is ahead of you, because you don't want to be setting off and grinding through the gears straight away. And then there's the start itself. And this one caught me by surprise on my first event, because the starter will actually, or the assistant, will hold you upright on your bike. So you'll come up to the start line, clipped in on one side, they'll hold your bike securely and you clip in on the other, and you're then ready to go. And to start with, I felt really uneasy with this. If you're really not wanting to do that, then just let them know and they'll be more than happy to let you do a standing start. But they have done it hundreds of times before, so you're in safe hands. And you're off. It's race time, and it's so tempting to go all out from the start. You've got adrenaline pumping, you're going to be feeling fresh because you've not had a swim beforehand, and it's really tempting to just go too hard from the start. So remember, it's going to be anything between a 20 and a 40-minute effort depending on the course and how fast you are. But you need to consider your pacing, and it depends what factors you're using. If you're using heart rate to measure your effort, don't forget there's going to be a bit of a lag, especially if you're starting from standing still. And then if you're using power, do try and keep an eye on your numbers. If you don't have either of those metrics, don't worry. Courses, like I said, are often out and back, so you'll at least get a halfway marker so you know roughly where you're at. The majority of time trials will be on public highways, at least in the UK they are, and they tend to be on dual carriageways here, which are great for getting that extra speed, but it does mean you're going to have to contend with fellow road users. And just because you're in a race doesn't give you any priority or right of way. Most events will usually put up signs, so at least the drivers should be aware that they're sharing it with cyclists who are racing, and you'll quite often have officials who will be trying to control some of the traffic and maybe even working some of the junctions, but you are ultimately still responsible for yourself on the road, so make sure you always check, even if you're given the green light by the official. And sometimes if you're out there in bad weather or it's dim light, it's a good idea to make sure you're very visible, so a rear light isn't going to do any harm to your aerodynamics, it's just going to add to your safety. You want to cross that finish line with nothing left to give. And that's a hard one to pace, and it's quite a hard concept for us as triathletes to get our head around because we're so used to running off the bike, but embrace the fact you don't have to and give it everything. And when it comes to the line, you want to make sure you ride through that line and you don't start easing off until you're well and truly across it. And then just take your time to spin out and use your recovery up the road and wait to stop until it's safe to do so. If you're on a dual carriageway or something, then you might need to go a little bit further until you can actually turn around and come back. And then you'll need to be patient afterwards whilst the organisers collate the results. There's no point in you asking because everyone wants to know, but they'll be doing their best to get them out as quickly as possible. So use that opportunity to have a bit of a warm down, put your bike away and chat to fellow time trials because it's amazing what you can learn. And also, in the UK anyway, we have coffee and cake at the end of time trials, and that's the main reason that I do them. Once you've done your first event, you've then got a great marker to work towards and measure yourself for your future races. And if you can find a local event, it's a brilliant way to use as a regular sort of training method to spice up your triathlon training. And I know I've had various experiences from time trials, but they've all made me mentally and physically stronger. So I would recommend giving them a go if you haven't done so already. Hopefully you've enjoyed it today. Give us a like if you have, and remember, check out our social media channels and follow GTN there too.